Welcome back, everyone. I hope you've enjoyed your lunch, you've had your coffee, and you're all set for this high-level session where we're going to be asking what the pulp, paper and recycling mills of 2030 will look like and how we go about shaping them. It's been great having all of your questions and comments in the chat. Do keep those coming. We know that you're watching from all across Europe and that many of you are in groups in your offices watching us. So great to have you with us. Do keep those coming in throughout this session. And if we possibly can get to those at the end, then we will. Over the next hour, we're going to be hearing from the European Commission and from Cepi's incoming chairman, Ilkka Hämälä, to get their insights. But first, I'm joined back in the studio by Jori Ringman, Cepi's Director General. Jori, great to have you back. Jori, Cepi has around 500 companies across Europe, more than 900 pulp and paper mills, many of you from those mills and companies watching now. If the industry is to meet European green legislation and the changing demands of consumers, it's got to be able to disrupt and quickly, can it?
I think that's a very important question, Naomi, and I think it's not only to disrupt, but we need to bio-disrupt. And that's because that would have immediate and significant impact for better. I can think of at least 3 areas where we immediately would have that ability. It's in fiber-based packaging, it's in biomaterials for electric car batteries, and in the third area would be wood-based textiles.
And I know you like to talk about these wood-based textiles. Did you have more to say on that now?
Well, I was just thinking that if we all agree that there's a climate catastrophe looming just around the corner, then time is of essence.
Sure.
And if we can empower consumers to do the right choices now, then it will have this immediate impact, and we know it will be significant.
Sure, and it is an important topic, and I know that you do have lots to say about it. You're featured in a video on that very subject, so let's take a look at that now.
Anything you can do from fossil raw materials, you can also do from wood, ranging from food industry to green chemicals, and of course, sustainable textiles. Since we are becoming increasingly circular, also the value chain becomes circular. So what you pass down to your customers will come back to you in recycling. And I think this will become also important for the textile industry.
One of the bigger challenges with the recycling and textile industry is the recycling of blended fabrics. But it's not always about just recycling, it's also about incorporation of renewable materials that is just as important. If we should phase out fossil-based materials in the textile industry and supply it with renewable materials, then it's important that the forest raw material doesn't decrease.
If we start to think about Cepi, or otherwise the Confederation of European Paper Industries, I think what we should first say is that we're providing the renewable raw material that happens to be also low carbon and circular, which is called wood fibers, to a variety of downstream uses and that actually produce a range of different bio-based products, including textiles.
In the market of different textile fibers, the biggest raw materials are fossil-based resources and cotton, and they both come with their own challenges and problems. So we want to be developing a new textile fiber which would be preferred and much more sustainable than the benchmark. So that means that we have to come up with more circular and more sustainable ways of producing textile fibers in the future, and this requires innovation.
Our tradition of creating cellulosic fibers is over 100 years old, and they are commercially available.
Plantation forestry in South Africa is quite unique in that it has actually served to protect natural forests and has served to increase the carbon pool in South Africa. From a forestry virgin raw material point of view, our innovation efforts are focused on climate adaptation. We have a very extensive tree breeding program, and this program is devised to develop trees that are resistant to extreme climate conditions, and is also focused on ensuring that the trees can adapt to pests and diseases that we are continuously faced with as a result of climate change.
Wood is a renewable resource, a natural resource, and wood contains cellulose. And cellulose is the same raw material as cotton and linen is made of. For the retail and for the brands and for the consumer, transparency is important. They want to know exactly where the product's coming from, what are the environmental, social impacts. We use a blockchain technology to track it along the value chain so that we can be sure that the fiber ends up in the garment and that the fiber which is in the garment is really our fiber.
Our industry has achieved 29% decarbonization since 2005.
But of course, this is combined with industrial symbiosis.
Sustainable sourcing is easier with collaboration. So you work with passing information along the value chain and you trust each other for the information. And the industry is prepared and investing in the future. So we are the industry of the future.
The industry of the future. Fascinating then for me to learn that the tradition of creating cellulosic fibres is over a century old, Europe. It's never been more timely than now. You know, consumers want sustainability. They want transparency around the products they buy.
Absolutely, and the technology really is leaping forward now, including circularity as well, as we just heard.
Yeah. Now, COP26 in Glasgow has just come to an end. Saving the world's forests and cutting emissions top of the agenda. How has this been received by the European paper industry?
Well, we fully support this because this really is aligned with our agenda for the past decades already. And we think it resonates very well with our work.
Resonates how? Can you give some examples?
Well, looking back, we have halved our emissions and doubled our recycling rates in the past. But now I can give 3 examples of how we are bringing things forward as well. So we have just launched our contribution to the Commission 3 Billion Tree initiative. And this is something that we believe that we are in a key position to help the Commission to make it success, because we have this long experience of knowing how sustainability in forest management can actually be reality and make it a long-lasting success. The second thing I can think of easily is the Energy Solutions Forum we have in Cepi. This is pretty new. We started it last year, but it already has gained huge popularity in the industry. We know that we are, as a sector, very progressive and often leading amongst the other industries. But this challenge we have with climate change and energy transition is so big that alone we can't do it. So we have to find partners, we have to find collaboration to make it happen. And now in this Energy Solution Forum, we often find these surprising and quite new ways of tackling the issues to get to 2030 and 2050 targets. The third example, I think, is what we heard already earlier this morning from my colleague Susanne Haase, which is the Forever Green Alliance, where we have joined together 85 companies from all across the value chain. And they have mobilized more than 500 experts to make sure that we can perfect the circularity of fiber-based packaging. And this is something that's both amazing, but I'm really proud of it as well.
I think you have every reason to be proud. It's an overview there, but it certainly sounds that Cepi is leading the way in innovation and in collaboration. Absolutely.
Yeah, you're right. That's and it has also energized the industry, sure, which is very nice to see.
Sure, and that is exactly the feel of these 2 days, and we're hearing more about this. So sustainability and innovation are priorities. Talk me through then, does that fit with the EU legislation and the European Green Deal?
I think so. Intrinsically, what we have in our industry is exactly what the policymakers would want to have. But there's a risk, I fear, that the solutions we have and the shared value we can offer to the society can be overlooked and lost in this huge rush of rolling out this massive policy in the Green Deal. And that's something that we have to pay attention to.
Can I push you a bit more on that? You talk about being intrinsically aligned and the values and so on. Can you talk further on that?
Well, for climate change, we have 2 key solutions. One is of course, very obvious. It's the forest acting as a sink. And most people would know that. But what many people don't know is that forest in Europe is growing. And as the forest is growing, of course, the carbon storage in the forest is growing. So I personally feel that the storage of carbon in forests is much more important than the speed as for doing it, which is the sink. And Yet something that even fewer people know is that trusting to have the forest operate alone is not going to be enough. If we don't stop pumping up the fossil emissions from the ground, there will be not enough forest to solve that alone. So we have to combine it with the second solution that we can offer, which is these wood-based materials and products that our sector is putting on the market, like paper and board and many others. So if instead of using fossil-based materials and products like petrochemicals, we use these wood-based materials, then carbon can actually stay stored and captured in the ground where they do belong. And these two go hand in hand. So if we can stop emitting carbon from the ground by substituting it with wood-based low-carbon goods, then the forest sink also has better chances of meeting the challenge we have with the climate change. And actually, the good news is that I'm not here alone saying this. Actually, the whole science is backing us up. In August, we had the latest report from the International Panel of Climate Change, and they actually repeated again this same message, that you have to have sustainable forest management, including harvesting, to help the forest to adapt to the climate change. And with the harvested wood, you can then have this substitution of more fossil-based materials with these low-carbon materials. And then together, that will be solving the issue. And the United Nations FAO just this month repeated the same messages when they said that there's a need to scale up the bioeconomy globally.
It's interesting because from what you're saying, if I understand correctly, is that this focus on sustainable forest management and circular economy, it goes way back, that we can say in your DNA, pre any EU legislation and obligation.
Absolutely, you are very, very right there, Naomi. So we were circular avant la lettre. So nobody knew the word circular, but we already were acting it. And then renewable and bio-based, we have been also from the very beginning of the industry, which is going back about 2000 years. So of course, in this long history, we have reinvented ourselves as a sector several times. And actually, we are at the moment in a process of reinventing ourselves again. But what we are not losing, what we are retaining is this DNA of being circular and bio-based. And another thing I wanted to raise here, and then it's somehow echoing the little video we saw quite a bit earlier, is that we are an industry very much made in Europe. This is important for two reasons, at least. One is that we already saw in the COVID crisis that it's giving huge resilience for our sector. The second important thing is that then this whole life cycle, when it's European, then it's well transparent and well documented. So we are not one of those that import things with the nasty rucksack of environmental impacts, but we know exactly what our impacts are because it's all here in Europe.
My next question would be then looking towards the future as the industry scales up, as I imagine you will, how do you avoid replacing old problems simply with new problems?
Well, Naomi, we have also thought about that, and it's a very important concern that you have there. We have adopted another document, which is our Sustainable Product Pledge, which is indeed doing what you said, that guiding us to build back better, so that we are not repeating old problems or we are not replacing old problems with new problems. And we believe that we can do that if we are paying attention to this, and we will, of course. And there will be, by the way, a specific session about that immediately after this one.
Okay, so don't go anywhere after this. We have that session coming up. As a sector is advancing in and accelerating digitalisation, a key question that many of you watching here today are asking is, how do you future-proof it? How do you make sure it is attractive to young talent, Jori?
We are working on that too, and we there collaborate with the trade unions in Europe. So we have several projects where we, first of all, want to identify what are the new skills that we need in this transformation and transition, and then how we can attract those. And later on, we will explain a bit about the future mills that we are thinking about for 2030. And I think showing people that the industry work is not dark, dirty and dangerous, but it can be actually fabulously future-oriented, then that might be the helpful thing there to attract the skills.
Okay, Jori, thank you. We're going to be talking a lot more about those 2030 concepts. So, Jori, for now, thank you. And to get us started with this conversation, we have this message from Kerstin Jorna, the Director General of DG GROW, welcoming Cepi's vision. Let's take a look.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to be with you today to welcome the Cepi vision for 2030 for future paper mills. It's an important contribution to the Green Deal. Back in May, the Commission updated its industrial strategy. Update for two reasons, essentially. We want to draw the main lessons from the pandemic, and we want to look into the business case for green transition. Our ambition is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 55% in 2030 and climate neutrality in 2050. This must be a collective endeavour, and we appreciate your sector's contribution. One of the main lessons of the pandemic is that Europe needs to strengthen resilience and autonomy. Against the backdrop of the current energy crisis, the need to gain momentum in our twin transition and in our self-reliance is even more pressing. In this challenging context, your sector is an excellent example of Europe's resourcefulness. Paper is a Europe-based industry. Over the last months, you had to handle supply shortages for paper and energy. And this was because there was a very strong demand for wood. How can Europe help you to face these challenges? We introduced the so-called transition pathways to guide us to decide together how to go from where we are today to achieving our ambitious targets in 2030. Whether it's technology, whether it's skills, whether it's access to finance. We hope that these transition pathways will set the scene for the right investors to come in and for the right technology to scale up. We also look forward to the contributions from the paper sector, in particular for the pathways on energy-intensive industries, construction, textiles and mobility. You are part of the solution. We're currently also preparing a sustainable product policy initiative as part of the Circular Economy Action Plan. This will also be very relevant for your sector. Cepi's Sustainable Products Pledge is a welcome boost for our approach. Europe's industrial strategy will give us tools to navigate our way through the transition. But this toolbox must be underpinned by a robust regulatory framework. This is the very purpose of the Fit for 55 package presented in July. With this far-reaching and comprehensive set of proposals, the European Commission aims to revise the most essential pieces of Europe's climate and energy legislation. It will align the regulatory framework to the ambitious goals of the EU climate law. The role of forests as carbon sinks and guardians of the ecosystem biodiversity is indeed crucial. It's therefore pivotal that the industrial sectors depending on sustainable forests, like yours, continue to develop cutting-edge, innovative products and processes. In your sector, this would mean things such as doubling current yields, developing textile fibers, and upgrading residues. I have in mind transparent nanopaper, for example, for packaging, fast wound healing materials, or bio-based battery materials. This can be truly innovative. The key for the future will be to make the EU an attractive place to invest compared to other regions in the world. Undoubtedly, the Cepi vision for 2030 on the future paper mills shows the way to these emerging opportunities for industrial collaboration along the value chain. I'm delighted that many pulp and paper companies, in cooperation with their machinery providers, intend to offer such innovative solutions. Rethinking our value chains is the way to go. Investors will follow where they see the business case. Our industrial policy toolbox and the single market provide the adequate framework to scale your innovation fast. I wish you inspiring and fruitful discussions today. Thank you.
Well, that was Kerstin Jorna, the Director General of DG GROW. Lots to take in there in what she said. And to help us do that, I'm joined by Cepi's incoming chairman, Ilkka Hämälä. Ilkka, a very warm welcome to you. Great to have you here in the studio. There seems a very positive message we've heard. Let me just pick out a couple of things. Kerstin talked about Cepi's vision being an important contribution to the Green Deal. And she said very clearly that she sees Europe's paper industry, as part of the solution.
Yes, that was very good to hear, so that's recognized also in the DG GROW, and this is really what we are aiming to show, not only with our words, but what are we doing. So we want to be important part of the solutions.
Great. Okay, now we're going to be hearing shortly more about the innovative technologies that can get us to 2030. Kerstin talked about the Commission setting the scene for those technologies to scale up and for the right investors to come in. She says they want to make the EU an attractive place to invest. Well, that's what the policymakers say. Ilkka, you're running a multi-billion euro company, one of the biggest industry investors in Europe. Your most recent investment, 1.5 billion. Is the EU an attractive place to invest, and will investment happen with the Green Deal?
When we see the targets where European Union is going with its economy, so I think that it's very good place to invest, because there is a real need for renewable materials and real need for the transition from the fossil economy to circular economy, and like I said earlier, so we are part of that solution. So then we have strong belief in to the future for our industry in Europe, and like you said, so we have been executing since very many years already, very large investment program in different products within Metsä Group. So we have very strong belief in this. But then, of course, all the legislation, which is quite fast presently, which is, let's say, also affecting from one side or other to our industry. So the details are very important, so that they really also support the development and don't create us extra burdens or restrictions for this development.
So for you, there is a business case for the transition?
There is definitely a business case for the transition, and that comes from these global trends which are very strong in Europe. The circular economy, making functionality for the consumers with the least amount of resources. That is a guideline for how our sector is developing its processes, and that's why we really have a business case here.
Now, in that message, Kerstin clearly recognised your role, the role of the paper industry, and she asked how Europe can help you. So I put that question to you. How can Europe help you?
Europe could help us by giving sort of a long-term view of all regulation related to forestry, to our industry. I know that that's quite a lot to ask, because the political power changes time to time between elections. So, but we should have this kind of a longer-term strategies and views. When we are developing new products and new processes, and after that designing new mills and investing to new mills, that they are very lengthy processes. So, for example, textile process development, what we are now in the phase of this kind of experimental plant. So we started it 10 years ago, and now we are not yet in an industrial scale.
Okay, we're going to come back to that later as well. Lots to take in there. Thank you for that. Now, Kerstin also said that she appreciates the paper sector's contribution to meeting the 2030 climate targets. Good to hear, as you were saying. And I know that one of the steps that Cepi's taken to be prepared for 2030 is the mill concepts, which we are about to reveal here for the first time. Now, Cepi brought in an independent advisor, Vision Hunters. They are a forest management consultancy with more than 70 experts in the industry. They're independent. And Cepi set them this challenge. How will Europe's paper mills look in 2030? What can new technology do by 2030? And how can they contribute to circularity? Well, Teija Kontori is the managing director of Vision Hunters. I'm happy to say she joins us now. Teija, a warm welcome to you. Great to have you with us.
Thank you very much. Pleased to be here.
Now, we heard there from Kerstin Jorna that it's pivotal that industries depending on sustainable forests, like the paper industry, continue to develop cutting-edge and innovative products and processes. Well, the 2030 mill concept speaks to that. I know we're all dying to hear the results, so I will hand over to you and let you present them.
Thank you, Naomi. So I'm delighted to be here, Paper and Beyond, presenting 2 key findings on how future 2030 pulp, paper and recycling mill concept will look like, and how it can contribute to sustainable industry development, green transition, and in broader scope, competitiveness and value creation of the industry. So as Naomi mentioned, our findings will be based on board comprehensive study conducted during this year on analyzing what novel technologies are available and how this 2030 future pulp, paper and recycling mill concept would be looking like. Next, please. So European paper industry is going through a industrial transformation, and driver for that has been a change in consumer behavior, requirements from the brand owners like a sustainable packaging, ESG requirements, and also EU legislations and regulation. So this changing business environment is also driving a change for the technology development of the mill concept. So future pulp and paper recycling mill concept 2030 can be summarized in 4 main cornerstones. First of all, it will utilize sustainable raw material. It will definitely contribute to the circularity. It will apply digitalization, and it also will produce these innovative and value-added products through better utilization of the fiber raw material and side stream of the mill. And if we look at the more detail on these 4 layers analyzed, availability of the sustainable raw material is the key. So in core of the sustainable raw materials is the access to our sustainably managed forest resources. These novel and new technologies will enable us to utilize different raw materials, wood, non-wood, increasingly recycled raw material, but also alternative raw materials such as agricultural residues, such as straw, and also recyclable textiles. So these novel fibers will also enable us to produce textiles and textile fibers based on wood, paper, and recycled textiles. Novel technologies contribute to circularity and also the European Green Deal targets. For future 2030 mill, it will be increasingly energy efficient. It will have minimized emissions, having possibility to capture CO2, and all these contributing to decarbonization of the industry. These novel technologies and processes will further reduce the usage of chemicals, water, reduce the waste, and also go towards circular and closed water cycles. New technologies are also searching and finding opportunities to utilize all fractions of wood fiber and side streams produced at the mill. These new innovations will enable us to produce functional paper products, new packaging solutions, and they will continuously contribute to reduction of raw material utilization. As a third layer, this digitalization, it will be a major enabler of this change in efficiency. And our industry can offer sustainable raw materials and solutions for a variety of industry and downstream end uses. So our industry can offer low carbon circular alternatives to fossils. And these solutions will need to be developed in cooperation with the other industries across the industry boundaries, in cooperation with chemical industry, pharma industry, and fashion industry. And commercializing these novel products increase our industry competitiveness and create value for the industry. Next, please. And here we can see some of the findings from analysis made by Vision Hunters. So from the all novel prudent technologies 2030 were listed, and they were applying existing technologies also that are used in a novel way. So what this picture shows is that share of novel technologies and solutions available 2030, and how these novel technologies are divided in terms of impact. So where do these technologies contribute? So firstly, in the blue, we can see the resource efficiency and circularity. Secondly, yellow, environmental climate impact, including all the decarbonization, alternative fuels. Then green, digitalization, the blue digitalization for improved performance, quality, and operational efficiency, technology, value creation, and competitiveness. So what is impressive is to notice that these first three are contributing 1/3 of all and showing really our industry contribution on sustainability. Digitalization has a major role here, and if we look at only 1/5 of these new novel technologies are contributing to technology development itself. And the low share of value-added technologies can be explained partly due to the reason that even though these long list of technologies exist, due to the technology readiness level or commercialized level, they are not still on the list by 2030. So these all technologies will enable the transformation for pulp and paper industry. But it's also important to remember that our industry is very capital intensive, and these technology developments are more like evolutionary, and big impact can be only made through large-scale investments. And here I would like to also state for CEO of Vattenfall, Anna Borg, on her speech on the COP26, she was saying that the largest risk is not transformation. The customer demand will change so much faster than our industry processes. To be early is challenging, but to be late is devastating.
Teija, thank you. Can you give us some examples of those new technologies that you see leading the change to 2030?
Yes. So here is a list of some of the selected novel technology out of the hundreds of lists, so that we have selected to make the bigger change by 2030. So these concepts are expected to be operational by 2030. Some of these examples are like a novel lignin application to utilize lignin for the biofuels as a raw material, but also like a carbon fiber, so different many end uses. Digitalization, digital flings, also blockchains mentioned today, so enabling more optimized production, quality, and transparency of the value chain. Then novel functional film coating materials that are enabling the packaging and fully renewed from sources. So these investments are by nature many interesting, and they have a different indirect value creation potential to our industry. And many of these has a long payback time, or the payback time can be calculated based on the new value-added products. But it's good to remember that still part of these investments, like decarbonizing, increasing environmental performance, closing water cycle, these investments, they don't have payback, or the payback time is long. And this is why it's critical to understand and have access to finance for these type of industries. So we can really rewrite the story when we understand the problem, and these novel technologies will enable the solution for transformation of our industry. But we need to do it in cooperation with other industries. And this transformation and change, of course, need to be based up by policies and access to this climate finance.
Teija, thank you. So we've got the list there. Kerstin Jorna also named a few like transparent nanopaper for packaging, fast wound healing materials and bio-based battery materials. So Thea, question for you. In your view, having done all of this research, what will it take to see these new technologies in action for 2030, and is it even possible tech-wise?
To answer your first question, at the end, the key and will be pulp and paper companies having solutions and adopting these technologies. So, which actually leads to the answer to your second question. So, technologies will enable the change, and many of these technologies are in different novelty level today, and some of they are emerging. So, the challenge will be how to make this feasible for the industry to adapt. This is why I mentioned already that the access to feasible finance will be critical. So the green transition, on my opinion, will happen in cooperation with other industries like medical industries and chemical industries. So when joining the understanding of our industry, raw materials, fibers, and putting them together with the capabilities of the and performance requirements of the other industries like plastic or biomedicals, textile fibers, then we can create solutions that can be really innovative.
So we keep coming back to the fact that it needs feasible finance, large investment. Where will that investment come from?
Yeah. So our industry is very capital intensive, and asset life cycle for pulp mill as a single equipment can be more than 40 years, which is good to remember. So when investing to new pulp mill, many novel technologies can be applied at once. But when we do the replacement investment, then the change is slower, and there's always trade-off between the different technologies. Not all of them can be applied in the one mill. So the change will happening evolutionary. Also, adopting of these new technologies typically involves a technological risk. So there we need to have a vehicle and to minimize this risk, whether it's financial support or or some kind of access to feasible finance. Then we can see these technologies in action.
Okay, Thea, thank you so much for that. I know you're going to stay on just in case there are any questions for you, but for now, thank you very much indeed. So there you have them, the 2030 mill concepts unveiled today for the first time. That's just the summary, of course, just scratching the surface, but it gives you a flavour. Well, Ilkka is still with me in the studio, and we're also joined by Peter Droel, who is Director at Prosperity, DG Research and Innovation, to discuss these mill concepts. Peter, a warm welcome to you. Great to have you here.
Thank you.
And I have to say, great title. What does it mean?
It means that the entire Research and Innovation Department of the EU has been reoriented around sustainability. So we have directives for prosperity, but also for people and for planet. Because we see, and you see that also in COP26, the leading role science has in this transition. And my mandate is about industrial technologies, knowledge valorization, investment agendas in order to make these transitions possible.
It's going to be very interesting to people watching here. And I have to say, you did say to me just before you came on that I could drill you. So I do encourage you, get those questions in the chat. And if we can, we'll get them and we'll put them to Peter. This is your chance. So let's start then. Your reaction, Peter, to Cepi's 2030 mill concepts.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to see the comprehensive analysis of technologies at stake, how they can contribute in the different production sectors. And for me, this is very relevant because we need these roadmaps. And Ilkka Hamela referred to the need for long lead times. We see that in research and innovation more generally. And a strong long-term message from the EU or from policymakers. So let me just make one point very clear here. With the European Green Deal, our vision to be the first climate neutral continent with a review we have done for the targets for 2030, so at least 55% reduction, we have given a very clear signal. And the COVID crisis, the pandemic, has not weakened that ambition. It has accelerated and strengthened our ambition with the next generation EU measures and the reform, building back better ambitions we have. So we have this clear signal, and every sector counts. And I see that very clearly, that we have more and more of these roadmaps coming up. And I see this roadmap as very relevant. What I also see is that we need to integrate the different roadmaps from different sectors and also see what technologies relevant in one sector could be relevant for other sectors. Jori referred to industrial symbiosis. I think that's very relevant, and that's what we will do also from our side, from research and innovation, under the new European research area.
Okay, great. Now, some of the technologies we heard about there from Thea, they're all European, and credit, I understand, exists thanks to finance from the Commission. So good to mention that. But now it's the next step. You recognise there what Elke had said earlier about needing this long-term view. Can I push you on that a bit more? Because we've got two stages. We've got the 2030 concepts. We've got these technologies available, ready to go. How do we accelerate them? Is there the investment and framework, the investment that Thea talked about to support this? Can you talk to us concretely about how this can happen?
Yeah, so we have from the research side, under this program Horizon Europe, we have plenty of opportunities to cooperate. But we also see that in synergy with other programs. With the 750 billion we do for recovery and resilience, where national plans can put efforts into infrastructures, into research projects which are relevant. We have also, under the emission trading scheme, the Innovation Fund, which gives very substantial funding for individual companies. We have for breakthrough technologies. So we are not lacking instruments, not lacking funding to de-risk investments. What we do need even more is to scale up and increase our technology adoption rate. And this is perhaps a weaker point in Europe, where we need single market, technology valorization, and cross-sectoral spillovers.
Okay, so Europe not lacking the instruments and finance, perhaps a little slow on the accelerating technology. Elke, your thoughts on this? Is this what you want to hear? Do you want to hear something different?
No, this is there are very good elements what I want to hear, and I think that this speaking about these roadmaps, so coming from different sectors, which are sort of a forming structure which is leading to the final target. So this is what we should have and what we are already, let's say, having. But I would like to ask a question. So how do you see the present situation if we look our targets 55 and all these development roadmaps? So where are we? Can you evaluate? So are we 20% there in the roadmaps, or 50% or 60%? And can we get also the feedback to the industry that here we are missing something, that you should be do more on that sector?
Yeah, very difficult question. Difficult to quantify. Let me start with a positive thing. I can say with assurance that we are the most advanced globally as regards the delivery on the Paris commitments and turning this into binding regulation. We have the climate law, Kerstin Jona mentioned it, we have the Fit for 55 package, a whole range of legislative initiatives to that purpose. So in terms of setting the scene and the framework, I think we are 80% there. The implementation, that is something where I would not want to make a statement in terms of percentage. I mentioned public investment, but the bulk will be private investment. There we need to channel private funds. There we have this important initiative on a taxonomy for green investments. We are the biggest, now the EU is the biggest giver of green bonds. So the funding is also coming. Whether we will meet, how quickly we will meet all this depends on all of us. And I'm not going to make a prediction. But the voice of industry, under the renewed industrial strategy, we have something quite remarkable for the acceleration of the green transition. That's we're calling co-creation pathways to transition. And we have industry fora where industry representatives, academics, NGOs are giving that input. So please do that. You have the channel.
Peter, you did mention taxonomy there. So let's talk taxonomy. Ilkka, investments will soon be very much guided by this. How do you see this changing things for you as an investor?
Well, the basic idea in taxonomy to guide the investor, let's say, activity to the desired direction. So the basic idea is very good. The process of creating the taxonomy has been somewhat, let's say, challenging. It has been not open enough, and maybe if we look things that have affected our sector, so maybe there has been too much weight on views which are not actually supporting the development of the industry. So here again, so the basic ideas are good, but now we should have the execution so that it really supports the transition and supports also the economical development of European Union, because sustainability has 3 pillars, and economic pillar is one of the pillars in sustainability.
Peter, did you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I'm not challenging whether the process was nice. I think the ambition and the target is clear. And here also we are leading. And it's no surprise that it's not easy to agree. I mean, we looked at 80 different technologies and what is, to find categories, what is doing a significant contribution, to exclude activities which do significant harm, so the no significant harm, but also the discussion we had on would we include doing less harm. So I think we are at something very important, still at the beginning, but which will channel investments in the right direction.
Okay. Now, we've been hearing, of course, that the technologies are there for 2030. We have them there, it's possible. But talking to people here while I've been here, I'm hearing that the breakthroughs in technology are not yet there to get us to 2050 carbon neutrality. And there's an extremely narrow window right now to get there. That Ilkka referred to this. You know, we have to be thinking now to get the whole process going, to get it to the market in 10 years. So, Peter, I want to ask you, do you think that policymakers are even aware of this challenge, this very narrow time frame? And how can the EU make sure this breakthrough technology is invented, gets on the market, and is organised before 2050?
Yeah. No, policymakers are aware. I think there is the sense of urgency is everywhere. Thanks also to our strong civil society. We have the tools to go there. Yes. Let me give you one example, which also perhaps shows the new role of science and how we want to interact. We have started Horizon missions, European missions, and one of them is about carbon neutral cities. So by 2030, we want to have 100 carbon neutral cities in Europe. This is a systemic, also circular change, and we will leverage with that not only EU-level investment, not only science and research, but implement it with actors in different cities, and then use these as role models for other cities. And I can see that we can transfer this to the mills of the future, and what we just heard from Thea. If we have a carbon-neutral mill, if you have that ambition, I haven't heard that ambition explicitly, but if you have that by 2030, translate it, use that as a role model for others. Cepi had a very nice project in the past on the twin track project where you were playing competition, which is always very good and inspiring. So these are things which can help to accelerate this process and lead us where we want to be.
Okay, I'll let you respond to that. And I know that one of your mills, and forgive my pronunciation, the Äänekoski mill, which is pioneered by you, it's been very much playing into what we heard about there in the concepts of ensuring that all inputs used in the best way. Do you see that as a pathway to the future, and do you want to respond to Peter's thoughts there?
Yes, this our bioproduct mill concept is where it's feasible, so it's one way to this solution. So basically it means so that we have a modern technology in this case, so there is, let's say, most modern pulp line in the heart of this bioproduct industry, and then we are integrating other products, other companies into the same integrate. Presently, we are producing over 10 different industrial products in that integrate. There are about five or six different companies working in this technical integration, meaning so that we can optimize the use of energy and using all the side streams. So that's really fulfilling this kind of concept, the circular economy concept, and also we can get the whole site carbon neutral because we are generating with renewable resources the energy what we are needing for the whole integrate. But obviously this kind of concept is not possible in every possible location, but this is something what we are developing, and the same we are now ongoing project in Kemi where we are sort of duplicating this same concept.
Okay, well, good to hear, to be able to share that. Peter, you've heard a lot here today about what the industry is doing already to be sustainable and the potential there is for meeting the climate objectives. You've got the industry listening and watching right now, many of them. What's your advice? You may have touched on this already, but what's your advice now the industry wants to hear for them to stay innovative? What do they need to be doing?
Let me build on what Kerstin Jonas said about the industry and the European pulp and paper industry as one example, being the solution to our challenges, climate neutrality, digitalization, the digital decade, resilience in the face of recurrent crises. So my wish really is to have our strong industrial base in Europe being at the forefront of mastering this transition to sustainability, and if I'm a bit sharper, to move from an extractive industry towards a regenerative industry. And this is what we call Industry 5.0, which is going beyond just digitalization and putting the sustainability and the ingenuity of the worker in the center.
And what's your role as well in that case? You know, you've touched on this, we're hearing it's so key to ensure the competitiveness of European tech and manufacturing. At your side, what's being done to support that and keep that happening?
Yeah, we do investments, so we program really portfolios of investments on industrial symbiosis, on hubs for circularity in partnership with industry. We have a wonderful partnership on process for planet for energy intensive industries. So we have these investments. We have policy on adoption of new knowledge created across the EU. So this is what we do also in terms of policy under what we call the single market for research and innovation. You mentioned disruptive technologies. We will soon come out next year with a new strategy on innovation, which will deal with access to finance, which will deal with disruptive technologies and how we can scale this up more than today.
Okay, it all sounds very positive, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. This is what we have to do. I must say that when we are designing mills and new processes, so we do not often use word disruptive. So we more believe in speedy evolution. But maybe that's the same thing.
Sounds very similar. It sounds very. I'm seeing quite a lot of agreement. Am I correct? Yes. Are we being diplomatic, or you're happy with what you're hearing?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, I think I'd like at this point to bring Juri back in and get his thoughts. I know he's been listening in on the conversation. And Juri, great to have you back in. I wonder if you have, listening in on this, have any thoughts, any to add to this?
Well, it has been very encouraging to hear this discussion, because it really is confirming what we aim to do in Cepi and as an industry, of course. I heard from Peter very clearly that he believes that the signal from the policy is clear, and there shouldn't be any doubt about that, what is the direction and the ambition that is being set there, and that COVID indeed has accelerated that moving further. So we are agreeing to that. I was very happy to hear this idea of putting lots of sectors to work together with their roadmap. So not working in silo, but working together. And this is indeed also something that we believe in Cepi as well. And then finally, I heard this idea of building the strong industrial base in Europe with this idea of regenerative industry 5.0, where not only it's regenerative for the materials and resources, but also putting the people in the center of that. And that sounds like we could easily agree to that too. From Ilkka, I heard many important messages. He was agreeing that these targets are actually making this a good place to invest, because there's a clear need for these solutions that we can bring to the market. And that, of course, is essential for making the investments. But, of course, it's important to remember that this long cycles of innovation, which is plus minus 10 years, without any doubt, and then longer investment cycles, we heard it could be up to 40 years of investment cycle, sometimes don't match with the short policy cycle. So let's see how that can be solved. But it seems to be still, I think, like you said, there seems to be a lot of agreement in this, and that's good to hear.
A lot of agreement, a fruitful conversation, one I imagine that is going to be continued. This session has flown by as we knew it would. So for now, well, I thank you, Peter, thank you, Ilkka, for joining us here, for taking part in this conversation. It's been a great one. I know we're having some good feedback about this already, so thank you. And thank you to Teija and to Kirsten as well for their part in this session. Jori, we set out asking what the pulp, paper and recycling mills of 2030 will look like and how we go about shaping them. Are we clearer? I'll hand over to you for a few closing thoughts.
I think on the 2030 concepts, I do appreciate that it might not be exactly clear yet for all the viewers, because we could in this short session just scratch the surface, and it's the tip of the iceberg that we presented to you. But rest assured, we will roll that out and disseminate it across the whole of the sector, so that we can all work on those concepts that we have developed. And it's a real wealth of knowledge there, and big thanks to Vision Hunters for their support in doing that together with Cepi. But maybe the three thoughts that I would like to finish with is that we heard from the European Commission, Mrs. Joona, and also from Peter, this need to build these transition pathways. And we know that this consultation is ongoing and this co-creation is only just started. And then, of course, Cepi is one of the sectors that will now contribute to that with a lot of materials, but including also this 2030 mill concepts. So we are looking forward to seeing what is then the final outcome of this, because it's a new way of working with the Commission. Second thing is that we are obviously ready to shape the next generation of solutions. But like Ilkka mentioned somehow in the sidelines, that the regulatory risk would be a poison for this good development that is ongoing there. So what we need is stability and predictability, and maybe these clear signals that are now being given, even if we don't know all the details yet and nobody knows all the details yet about the legislation, is something that we have to keep in mind. So stability and predictability needs to be there soon enough to make things happen. And maybe the last thing is that even if we feel that we are exemplary, and Mrs. Joona also thankfully mentioned that in her message, and then often leading amongst the industry sectors, we are not able to reach this ambition level alone. So this need for collaboration and learning from others is there. But maybe we also need to think of better communicating what we do, what we have, because maybe others can learn from us as well. And maybe we are not good enough in communicating what we do and what we have in our hands. So this sector integration that Peter also mentioned and Ilkka supported the idea is of course something, and then in the plant level, even in Äänekoski, you do it in real life as well. So that probably has a lot of potential that we can still further tap into, and this is very much in the way of working of Cepi. I really like the quote that Teija shared with us, saying that to be early is challenging, but to be late would be devastating, and this is where we need to strike the balance.
Okay. Jori, thank you. We are out of time. Thank you for being a part of this. Still plenty more to come this afternoon, including next up, a look at how to crack the sustainability matrix for wood-based products. But for now, from us here, thank you.